let's get started then. So just a little introduction about me. My name is, as you said, Jake D'Annunzio, and on YouTube I run the channel Daikaiju Legends. I've done that for about 8 years now, I think. So as a lifelong Kaiju fan with a passion for filmmaking, I've just been making fan films like as long as I can remember. Like, you know, when I was 5 years old, I was smashing toys together, and I still do that, but professionally. But honestly, I think that fan films are one of the biggest and honestly most important parts of the Godzilla community. I just find they're so entertaining to watch, and they bring a whole lot of people together, and they're just a big thing that has influenced my career path, and it's super fun. So my channel is dedicated to Kaiju fan films and fan series. My main one that I make, some of you may know, is Zone Fighter. That's my main passion project right now. And yeah, so first video that we have is just a quick little showcase of some of the stuff that I've done, if you have not seen it before, just so you can get a feel of what I have done in the past. Alright, so that's just a showcase. That's mainly like over the past year, the stuff that I've done, because I prefer to show just the newer stuff, because I don't like my old stuff that much. But, yeah, so... Alright, so today's topics that I'm going to cover, unfortunately, we'll probably like try to get through as much as we can in as little time, because I could talk about this stuff for hours on end, but we only have 1 hour. So I'm going to talk about pre-productions, that's things like scripting, storyboarding, finding actors and locations and all that kind of stuff, and just like getting your general plan together. And then we'll talk about production, just tips for filming human scenes and kaiju scenes alike. Talk about shot compositing, camera movements and all that. Post-production, and then, which is my big thing, visual effects and editing, sound effects, all that kind of stuff. And then any time that we have at the end, we'll do a short Q&A in case anyone has specific questions on anything that I don't cover. So starting on pre-production, you know, where do you start? Obviously it's finding your story, and one of my favorite quotes from film school so far is, "Something wants something badly and is having difficulty getting it." And that's a story. You know, you have your character and your conflict, and that's your story. So finding something like that, and I like to ask myself 3 questions. This is something that I was taught in film school, which really helps, you know, get ideas through your head and helps refine them a lot. So, why do you want your story to be told? Why are you the one who should be telling that story? And how do you want to tell your story? So those are all 3 questions that like you just need to ask yourself. Like that's something I can't really give the answer to. That's something that you need to, you know, look inside of yourself for. Jesus, that sounds. So once you find your story, whatever that may be, you know, for kaiju movies it might be something simple, like I want Godzilla to fight King Ghidorah. That's perfectly fine. So, what comes next? You gotta refine it. So I just consider the following when trying to put a story into action. The big thing that I'm going to talk a lot about today is personal access. So, you know, what's something in your possession that's unique to you? Like what can you bring to the table specifically that like pretty much only you can bring? Whether it's a certain character, you know, existing or custom made that you want to put in your kaiju film, or if you've got like a unique way of storytelling, or if you do a unique way of, you know, creating a kaiju film or something that not a lot of people do. You know, there's tons of ways. There's stop motion, animation, suitmation, all that kind of stuff. And who do you know that can come along for the ride with you? One thing that I've definitely learned over the past year and a half or so is that having other people help you with your fan film in any way possible is that's a big step up. Because when I was younger, it was all me doing it, and it's not fun, trust me. So, you know, anyone that would be interested in helping, and we'll touch on this a little bit later, but you know, you might not expect people to be wanting to help, but they will be, trust me. Then narrowing and specifying. So what's the story's underlying significance to you? Like if a story doesn't mean something to you, then why bother telling it, really? So like what is special about what you want to do to you? Like why is that monster battle that you want to do so important to you? And then what will people already know and what won't they? So that's sort of going into scripting, the type of stuff that you need to let your audience know is going to happen in the story, what kind of stuff they might not know. If you're making like an original character for your series or something, then they probably won't know much about that. But if you're doing Godzilla or something, they probably know a lot about Godzilla if you're doing a Kaiju movie on YouTube. And then again, like what's special and unique and unusual about what you want to make. So just finding that something special that's going to set you apart from everyone else. So then, getting ready to shoot once you've got your entire plan together. Locations. So again, like what do you have personal access to? And I'm going to touch on this in the next slide, I believe, which is a big thing. Like, think about like everything and anything that you have access to, because trust me, like you will want to use any major location that you can.
Sorry. Okay, keep going.
We're good now? Okay, there we go. And so yeah, what sorts of locations will make for interesting settings? You know, a lot of the times in the past, like I only filmed my human stuff on green screens, and that's not very interesting. So like look for live action locations is my advice to you, because you'll find cool stuff that is like, as long as you get out there, you're gonna be able to make a really cool scene, and people will be like, oh my god, that's amazing. He's like actually in that location doing that. That just elevates you to a more professional level, like right off the bat. So yeah, again, like considering with human scenes, like how does the environment affect the story? Like is there gonna be a monster battle there and all that kind of stuff? That's just stuff to consider in general when picking out locations. Like, you know, I shoot a lot of stuff by tree lines, because that's something easy for me to point the camera up past the humans and be like, whoa, look, there's a monster up there or something. Just stuff like that to consider when you're looking at locations. And that's something that I've been working on a lot, location scouting. And it's honestly fun. Like, you know, you can go out and look at locations and ideas will just pop in your head left and right, thinking of different scenes that you can have and all that kind of stuff. So it's a lot of fun. And then monster scenes, you know, there's tons of ways to do it. Green screen is my weapon of choice, just because that allows me to blend them wherever I want, whether it's a live action location or a CG thing that I created. Or you can do miniature sets, which require a little bit more handiwork, so to say. And that was my thing back in the day, but I've just transitioned to green screen, so that's more so what you know you can be good at. Obviously, miniature sets require a lot of modeling skills, which there are plenty of tutorials both for that and for green screen stuff that we will get into later on. So again, like yeah, for locations, take advantage of everything you have, because you know, that was my high school that I was like, hey, during a rehearsal for a play, can I like come in and film a scene? And they said sure. So you know, you just gotta like get out there and ask, like, hey, would this be cool if I just shoot something here real quick? And honestly, that just elevates your production value, because you know, you're actually somewhere, like somewhere unique. And there's stuff like, you know, we filmed on a bridge right here that allowed us to get a nice shot, like looking out into the water, and Godzilla's like actually in the environment and all that kind of stuff. So that was a cool thing. Just really anywhere that you can get your hands on is my recommendation, because you'll find all sorts of just cool and unique places that you can shoot stuff, and it'll really elevate your level of quality overall. Be adventurous. We just filmed something that we're showing later today in an actual abandoned building, which I don't recommend that you do anything that's illegal. Not that it was illegal, but you know, like, just the point is, like, go out there and find something. Like, you know, I would have known about this location if my friend Taylor wasn't doing photography and happened to be there, and I was looking for something like this. Like, you just gotta get out there and look for anything. Like, you might even just find a location that you're like, I want to work this into a story at some point, which I've definitely done before. And really, it also just makes filming a lot more fun if you're like on set. You know, you're in the moment basically. You know, also advice that I'll give is to shoot anything and everything. A couple months ago, we went to like our downtown area and just filmed buildings to use as background plates. Like, at some point, maybe I'll want to put monsters behind those buildings or something. I haven't yet, but I just have that footage just in case I want to do that. I was at the beach this summer, and I filmed stuff of the ocean just because I'm like, hey, in case I want to have a monster come out of the ocean, I can have that footage to use. So like, if you ever see anything that you just want to have, like, you know, monster or even B-roll shots of stuff walking around and all that, shoot something, really. You know, we've got great cameras in our pockets as we all sit here on our phones, so use those if you don't even have like a proper camera on you. Create your own breathtaking worlds. I've like been getting more and more into creating like actual computer-generated environments, stuff like this, where I created a whole like asteroid field and planet and wormhole for a camera to fly through for a shot that I was making. And I mean, this was only used in one shot, but it was a lot of fun to make, just because instead of having, you know, a still picture of a planet or something, you're like, this is the planet outside of this nebula system or something. Like, you get to actually fly through it, and people get to take in the environment and understand the sort of impact that this is going to have on the overall story, so to say. So, next part of pre-production, when you're getting ready to shoot, is finding actors. So, I'll tell you this, if you're in high school or college, or like even middle school or anything, if you have just access to anyone, especially theater programs, just, yeah, fine, make friends in theater. That's what I did. My old stuff that I was making, I played all of the parts on a green screen, and it was, it's not fun, so, like, just because I never expected people to say yes to filming with me on my dumb action figure tokusatsu series, but you know, I eventually worked up the courage to ask, and now we've got like some of the best friends that I've ever made working on this show with me. So just like, my advice to you is just ask away and be courageous about it, because trust me, I was that person who was super shy and awkward and thought that everyone would hate me if I asked, but you know, I took a chance, and it's paid off immensely, I think. And I thank all these actors immensely for working with me. And speaking of working with actors, be willing to work with their schedules and prepare to be spontaneous on set. If you're in the role of the director or producer at all, you need to be prepared for anything to go wrong literally hours before filming. That's been the biggest challenge for us, like, while we have amazing actors to work with. Like, we're in college, we have jobs, one of them is still in high school right now, so getting a schedule together is difficult. So what we've had to do sometimes is film one half of a conversation with one actor, and then a couple weeks later, when we can get the other actor, we turn the camera and we film that end of the conversation. And you know, it can be a little bit jarring at first having to work with that, but I've done that a lot of times, and it's hard to make it work. But if you've got the mindset for it, like, you've got that mind that you can be like on set, be like, okay, I need to just like cut this conversation and like maybe scrap some of the shot ideas that you have just to be able to film like that, then I would say do it. But that is also dependent on your time constraint. If you're in a constant rush to want to try and finish stuff, like I sometimes tend to be, that might just be something you have to work with. But if you're super patient and are willing to spend, you know, months and months trying to film that conversation scene just right or something, then do that, because you'll probably get a better product overall. You know, it might take forever. We took 5 months once on a 15-minute episode, just because we couldn't schedule one of our actresses properly in the middle of winter. It was tough, but you know, we just had to make something work. So then, scripts and storyboards, like, you've got all your ideas together, and now it's time to put it on paper in some form. And I will always say, put everything that comes into your mind on paper or on a document of some sort, like, no matter what, because I'll be driving or something and just have some idea pop into my head, and I'm afraid that I'm going to lose it. Generally, I can retain that stuff pretty well, but I just always recommend writing, even if it's just a list, like a bullet point list of stuff that you want to happen. You don't even need to write out a whole script if you just have a couple of ideas. That's what I've done before. Like, just, have ideas and I create a little outline, so to say. I just bullet point all sorts of stuff. And that also helps because if you read it back to yourself later, you might realize that the stuff that you wrote down is utter garbage. And so having it written down just sort of helps you, like, it just kind of helps your mind process exactly what you're thinking. Because you might have an idea in your head. I've done this all the time. I got exactly what I want to happen in my head, but the instant that I put it down on a document or something, I instantly regret it and I realize I have no idea what I'm doing. So that just helps you sort of, you know, kick yourself into gear a little bit. Storyboards can also help keep track of your own visions for shots if you've got cool ideas, or even, you know, in film school they make you storyboard every single shot, and honestly, it's something that helps a lot. When you're working with so many shots in a single episode, you really start to lose track of the exact shots that you want. And if you're just looking at a script and you wrote down medium shot, she turns her head, that doesn't really help you much if you had something in your head while writing it. So storyboards, whenever you come up with a cool shot idea, that helps you just get a visualization. And it'll also help any crew or actors that you're working with. Because something that I've, like, you know, once I've started working with more people on set, instead of just myself, it's something that you have to realize that your vision only exists within your head. And it's hard to really explain what you want a shot to look like without drawing it on paper or something, or doing it yourself or something. So that's just something to keep in mind. Alright, so you've got all your pre-production stuff down and you're ready to film. So this is just a list of equipment that I would always recommend. Like, obviously you need a camera and tripod, duh. But you know, other camera tools that I recommend and we're starting to get into a lot, just because they can really elevate your production quality and you can get some really, really nice camera angles from doing all that. There's jibs or cranes, which are just huge arms that you attach a camera to the end of, and you can move it around all you want like a crane and get some really nice flying shots. There's sliders, which are things that go on top of tripods. You just slide a camera back and forth or forward and back, which again can help add smooth, dynamic movement to a shot, which will pretty much always make it more interesting to look at, especially if it's during an action sequence. Gimbals and Steadicams are literally things that you hold, like a little monopod or something, and it'll stabilize your camera for you as you're walking around or running, which is very useful for handheld shots, especially handheld shots where you want to add visual effects in later and you need to track the camera, because having those smoother shots will make it all that easier for you. And instead of having your movie look like a found footage Cloverfield movie, it'll look really professional and well done. A drone is a nice thing to have, which we were able to recently acquire, and it's a very, very nice piece of equipment if you want to get some super high angle shots. That's just something to elevate the production value more. GoPros, some of you might have. We're going to start using those for car shots and stuff like that. You know, just stick a GoPro on it somewhere that you wouldn't want to put your actual camera, and that will help make you feel a little bit safer about what you're doing. And then otherwise on set, you'll want lighting, reflectors, blocker flags, etc. Just to play with light. Because they'll teach you in film school how to be super precise with lighting, and it really does make your stuff look that much better when you get all that bright in filming. So I always will say, take your time in working on set, and you know, work with everyone that's there on blocking, getting the scene just right before you start shooting. So you know, generally the first thing you do when you get on set, before you even like set up the equipment or anything, is that you just want to take your actors and run through the scene real quick, just so they know exactly what's happening. Otherwise, you're going to set up the camera and they're just going to be like bug-eyed, looking like, oh, what am I supposed to do? So just being willing to take the time on set to do all that kind of stuff is really going to help you out and help your actors out a ton. Pay close attention to framing and cinematography. You know, try to make every shot count toward the story, and keep in mind any rules for shots that they'll teach you in film school. There's the 180-degree rule, which is saying that the camera should not be placed anywhere other than a 100-degree semicircle around the action that's happening, because it's jarring. If the camera's, you know, the action's like right here, the camera's here, and we go all the way over here. That's kind of weird. unless it makes sense in the context of your story. Those are usually used during jarring moments in the scene or changes in the story to indicate a change in a character or an idea that's presented. Rule of thirds, this is just a general photography rule, where you generally want the subject of your frame to be within either the top third or one of the first or second thirds of the frame, because that will, it's just an aesthetic thing. I don't know the science behind it, but it just makes your shots look cool. Size of subjects in frame, you know, that's just something to keep in mind when you're thinking about, like, who has the power in a scene or something, all that kind of stuff. Who's bigger in frame? Why are they bigger in frame? What does all that mean? Like, ask yourself why you're making the choices that you are when you're trying to shoot a scene. Type of angle, again, that just helps with getting the story across in your scene. You know, you do a low angle for someone who's big and powerful, or a high angle for someone who's weak and minuscule, all that kind of stuff. Dutch angles where you turn the camera to the side to indicate that things are off balance and something's not right. All that kind of stuff. Like, again, just have that in mind when you're filming all this, because it, again, will help you make sense of your own madness. Again, always be prepared for the worst of situations and the tightest of schedules. And the possibility that, you know, things will not go exactly as you planned. I don't think we've had a single shoot where something didn't go wrong, or, you know, we didn't have to have someone cancel literally the hour before we shoot or something. So, again, like, that's just part of being spontaneous on set. So, again, be prepared for anything terrible to happen, because trust me when I say it will. Alright, so that's all about human stuff and a little bit of monster stuff. So what about the kaiju filmmaking side of it? Talk about that. So a lot of people do stop motion, including myself, and that's what I have the most experience in, so I like to give a little bit of advice from my years of doing stop motion. So I have 3 P's of stop motion, so to say, and those are practice, which the practice makes perfect, and stop motion needs a lot of it. I've been doing stop motion for, like, pretty much since I started YouTube, like 7 years, 8 years now, and I'm still pretty bad at it, I think. Patience. It takes a lot of time. It could take 15 minutes just to make 3 seconds of footage. There will be a thing later that I show where it took 30 minutes to do about 5 seconds of animating. So having the patience to sit down and actually take all that in just for a couple seconds of footage out of your 5-minute, 10-minute, 20-minute long, even longer fan film, that's really going to show in editing and when you get the work out there, if you take the time and patience to do all of that. And then pictures. Take as many as you possibly can, because you can always remove frames in editing, but you can't add any more in unless you have expensive plugins, which we'll get into. You know, like, obviously there's things that involve fluidity of stop motion. You don't want someone punching to be the slowest thing ever, but I always recommend taking as many pictures as you can, because if you remove those frames in editing where it's moving slow, you can create a more fluid looking motion in the end. Other stop motion tips. Something that I've learned is don't feel like you have to animate 2 characters in a single shot if they interact. This is something that I've played around with, basically, where, you know, I'll animate people interacting or something. They're punching and kicking each other, but I just try to time it out when I'm filming, and I know the beats of the action that I want to happen. Sort of put it like on a metronome, if you will, where there's 1, 2, 3, that kind of thing. And you can animate your characters separately, and if you're filming them on a green screen, this is really the thing that it helps with. You can animate just 1 figure at a time, which kind of helps your mind not be so terrible. When you're trying to animate 2 characters at once, you're like, oh, was his arm going up or down or something? So I always like to animate 2 characters that are interacting separately, unless it's absolutely necessary that they be on the green screen together. So that's just a tip for you guys if you want to try that. And then if you want very subtle or smooth movements without doing stop motion, because sometimes your toys, they don't move too well. If you have Adobe After Effects, which we'll get into later again, try out the puppet pin tool, because that is something that's really going to help you out there, and we'll cover that in a little bit. So our production gear, just for anyone who is interested, I know some people like to ask what I use. Our camera, we use a Panasonic Lumix G7. So that's a good camera. It shoots 4K video. Ooh, I'm so cool. And it just gets generally very good quality stuff. And it's like it was $500 or $600 when I got it. That's after upgrading to other cameras that I've had. And it's a great camera for that price. Lenses, if you are into all that, I won't delve too deep into what all this means, but if you know millimeters, your focal depths and stuff, and your apertures, which is how much light you're taking, you know those. We've got like a 25mm prime, a 14-42, and a 45-150, which just helps us get a nice range of not only zooming depths, because with 14 you can get some really bright shots, and 150 you can get very, very zoomed in shots. And we have a good range of apertures for different lighting situations, because I've had to film in some low light situations that are pretty hard without a good aperture or ISO setting. We use a Manfrotto 502 HD tripod, just a very nice fluid tripod. We use a Rode Video Mic Pro for our microphone, which is a great shotgun mic. I am just starting to get into using boom poles and all that, just because generally the amount of people that we have on set is pretty much all the actors. So it's generally easier for us to just stick a shotgun mic right on the front. But if you're able to use a boom pole with that mic, or any mic really, I would recommend that over that. Lighting, we have two 5-bulb rigs with soft boxes and two 5-way reflectors. Basically just good lighting. We have a DJI Mavic Pro drone that we just got, like I said earlier. That's an expensive piece of equipment, but it shoots some beautiful footage. And again, take advantage of everything you have at your disposal. You might have a camera or equipment rental service nearby, or if you're in college like I am, they let you borrow their equipment for periods of time if you want. Or there's even stuff on YouTube where you can see, you don't even need like special reflectors if you want to have nice lighting. You can take like a white poster board, use that to reflect your light. Or you can take, like an exercise band or something, wrap it around your arms and legs, and use that as a slider or a jib, kind of. Just be creative if you don't have the money to drop on the equipment, because that stuff gets expensive, and I don't recommend blowing all your money on that, unless you're into it. Alright, so after you've shot all your stuff, it's time for post-production. So my arsenal, as I like to call it, is the Adobe Creative Cloud Suite, because I get that for free from the university. So I use Adobe After Effects for all my visual effects, compositing, all that. Adobe Premiere for sound editing and just putting the entire piece together. Adobe Audition for all of my audio editing. Adobe Photoshop for all of my photo editing if I need to do that. Adobe Illustrator I've started using for logo design. And Adobe Bridge is a good thing that helps your workflow a lot, especially if you have a dual monitor setup or something. If you have Adobe Bridge on the side, you can literally drag and drop any footage that you want and test it, and sound effects and all that. So that's a great workflow thing. That's not necessary though. And then After Effects by itself gets its own page, because I'm a visual effects guy for all the plugins that I use. So I use Optical Flares, which is a lens flare plugin from Video Copilot, which I like lens flares. I got a bit of J.J. Abrams in me. Element 3D is another Video Copilot plugin, which is essentially a that flies through it without having to invest or learn huge 3D programs like Cinema 4D or 3ds Max or something. Saber, that's a free plugin from Video Copilot that's pretty amazing because it's useful for creating beams. It's literally a plugin made for beams, which I've done tutorials actually on Atomic Breath with that, and so it's very fun. Color Vibrance is that's just what I use for tinting things to a certain color. It's useful if you want to have it, but it's not necessary. Trapcode Particular and Superluminal Stardust are kind of the same thing. They're just particle systems that you can make in After Effects, which are my favorite tools, because you can make literally anything that you want with particle systems. It just takes a lot of time and understanding of how, not necessarily how coding works, but how scripts work, in a sense, for particle systems, because there's a lot of things that you need to take into account when making those. Trapcode Mirror is just an interesting thing for making 3D fractals, just because it helps me emulate some of the effects that you see in Tofu series. Twixtor is an interesting plugin. I use that a lot of the time when I'm doing stop motion, and I wind up with a shot that I'm like, I could have had more pictures during that, you know, going back to take all pictures you can. Twixtor is a decently expensive plugin, but I have used a free trial, my secret. And essentially what it does, you can select a piece of footage and artificially slow it down as much as you want. It's not voodoo magic though, and you'll wind up with artifacts in your footage that people will be like, hey, you just blended some frames together there with a plugin and it looks pretty bad. And I'm like, yep, it does. And then heat distortion speaks for itself. Literally heat distortion, you know, there's a heat wave or flame breath or something or fire. It just is a plugin that really helps blend all the elements together if there's something hot in the scene. So special effects, stock footage and all that. So where do I get it? And they can be found all over the place, both free and paid for. Unfortunately, if you want great ones, you have to pay for them. But the best sort of starter kit that I will give you is from videocopilot.net. They've got a pretty big range of stock effects and plugins. Action Essentials 2 is what a lot of people start out with, and it's what I started out with. It's tons and tons of stock footage, from explosions to fire, dirt charges, smoke elements, dust elements, bullet hits, bullet casings, all that. But the thing with that is, everyone uses it. So you can usually like look at any video and be like, hey, that's an element from that effects pack that you're using. And that's something that I've learned. Shockwave is a pretty useful thing. It's literally energy shockwaves that you can just drop right into your scene and make some neat looking effects that way. There's tons of ways you can play around with that. VC Flight Kit has some aerial explosions that are very nice, as well as some explosion in plane noises and 3D sky maps. Element 3D we went over, which Element 3D I forgot to mention has tons of free and paid models for the plugin, including Star Wars stuff. Like I had that BB-8 earlier, so that was very cool. Optical flares, again, the lens flare stuff. Saber we went over, and they also have like over 150 tutorials by one of my favorite visual effects artists on YouTube, Andrew Kramer. He's a character, but once you get past that, it's some of the best tutorials out there for anything After Effects related. So, where do I get all of my special effects now? It's ACTIONVFX.com, which we are affiliated with now, so that's cool. They've got like the best library of stock effects in like huge resolutions, 2K, 4K, some of them are 8K, which is insane. They've got amazing explosions, fire, debris, fog, smoke, embers and sparks, and way more. We're not actually sponsored, we're just affiliated, so forgive my boasting about them. But they are really great, but they cost a lot, especially if you want to try and get a lot of elements. Well, they actually recently cut all of their items in half in price, which you would usually have to wait for a Black Friday sale to happen, but they've lowered all their prices. So I would say they're way more accessible now, because one explosion element used to cost you like $40, but now it doesn't. And they still have sales going on occasionally. Not as big, but sales nonetheless. So I would say take advantage of those. And they're adding like more and more stock effects every few months or so. I think they've added like a lot of fog effects, I think is their most recent thing, and dust particles and all that kind of stuff. Like they just have stuff for every situation, really. And most of their effects come with a pre-made alpha channel, which is nice because while I would say no effect is really drag and drop into your scene, ACTIONVFX stuff gets pretty close and it looks amazing. So where else? You can get stuff from redgiant.com, which is home to a ton of plugins like the Trapcode Suite, which is where I got that particular inform and mirror that I went over earlier. And they have other plugins too, including a lot of color correction stuff and stuff that'll help you in post, like noise removal tools, color correction tools, and just other plugins. I like to plug Tsunami a lot because I think that's a really cool plugin where it literally lets you generate art, which is pretty cool. And again, they can be very expensive, but if you're a student in any way, shape, or form, I think they will offer you 50% off of anything. So again, take advantage of everything at your disposal because you never know, there are discounts left and right if you qualify for them. So other tips for just compositing special effects. Again, YouTube is home to tons of tutorials. Like I do some myself, but like I spend some, like even today I spend days just binge watching tutorials, watching stuff like I want to do that. So always be willing to look at those tutorials no matter what. And so compositing, especially the kaiju scenes if you're filming stuff on a green screen can be rather difficult sometimes. So I like to always go with depth, lighting, and impact, and motion blur, which are all elements that will really help tie your scenes together. We've gone over a lot of those earlier. Impact, I usually use for big punches or beams and all that, so that'll help out a lot in making your things look huge and big. Other tips, that's just my little process. That's not what everyone has to follow or even should follow maybe. But you know, keying out elements and getting the environment ready and all that kind of stuff. And then just learning what does and doesn't work is the biggest part of compositing and doing visual effects stuff is what I've had to learn. You know, and you can try compositing different elements together for different results. Like, you know, you might have an explosion, but where's the explosion without the debris? You can add some rocks debris, you can add some dirt debris and all that kind of stuff. Like, just stacking those will help tie your entire thing together. Then After Effects, obviously I've gone over. They come with stuff pre-made, so you don't even need all the expensive plugins that I have. But it comes with stuff just like lighting creators, lens flares. It's got a basic built-in particle system for beams and fire and all that, which is very nice to have. So other general compositing tips, details make everything blend. I'm going to show some VFX breakdowns here in a second where you'll really see some of the details pop in. Like if you add a little bit of ambient dust particle in your shot, that just makes everything look way better, I found recently. Color correcting and editing will help as well, just sort of tie everything together in a nice little bow. If you're good at color correcting, which I'm not. Trust me, when you're asking yourself, what else can I add to this shot to make it look better? The answer will never be nothing else, because I will always find that there's stuff that you can keep adding to any shot, and it'll help make it look way better. There'll always be more particles you can add, more dust, more rocks, or something like that. But obviously you need to decide yourself when enough is enough, and it's time to move on to the next shot to make. And this is one visual effects shot right here. So it's just layers upon layers of stuff that you have to go through. Some of these are spark elements, some of these are particle systems, some of these are a Bandai figure moving around in pain or something. So, like, just to show you, this isn't, I don't think this is the biggest one that I've done, but this just shows you how much stuff can go into a shot if you want to put in all the work for it. And now we've got a quick little thing on VFX breakdowns, just our second video. And it'll just, it'll speak for itself really, and just give you an idea of the kind of work that goes into all of these types of shots. So I'll just let the video do the explaining. Goes into a lot of VFX shots, and I hope that encourages a lot of you to just take a lot of time with those kind of things, because it'll really help make them look good in the end, I think. So just a quick thing, we're going to run through a little bit so that we can get into a couple of questions before we have to wrap things up. Sound effects. ACTIONVFX has a ton of great ones that are free, in fact, so I recommend those. They've got explosions, surcharges, gun sounds, water, all that. Video Copilot has Motion Pulse, which is a pack of way too many sounds that any person would need, but you can never have too many, actually. Ranges from debris to glass breaking to bleeps and bloops from machines, machinery cranking and moving around, medical stuff and organisms and all that. Where else? You know, YouTube has tons of sound effects. I'm sure you all know that. This is just, I want to show real quick, this is like what a finished timeline of a project might look like. It's like this top layer here, the blue stuff, that's all the video. The green stuff beneath is all the sounds. That's actually pretty light compared to what it usually is, but that's about 15 layers of sound effects on each thing, just so you can see what that looks like. I think lastly, getting your work out there. Obviously YouTube, I'm sure if you're doing kaiju movies, you're doing it on YouTube probably. And you know, something that I learned when I first started is to take criticism well. You know, people will seem mean and rude, which they sometimes are, but really try to take into account what they say, no matter how rude they are, unless they give you no advice at all, like, man, this is terrible. Man, that helps a lot, thank you. The amateur film contest, obviously, that's one of my favorite things because you get to see your work alongside what other people are making. And that was always an encouragement to me when I was younger because it sort of, it put me into perspective. I'm like, man, I can't do anything that any of these people are doing. Like just comparing yourself to others. I mean, that's bad life advice, don't compare yourself to others. Compare your work to others, and if you've got that drive to improve, then you're going to improve. Because I've spent way too much time on this, trying to perfect it, and it's a challenge sometimes. The Film Festival at G-Fest, which is what I regularly do now. That's if you feel like you're ready to take a big boy step into some longer form stuff and you've got a really nice thing. I would see about getting in contact on getting your stuff shown there, because that's where I show all my stuff now. It's very fun. Continue improving. So there's just great resources. I won't list off all those, but these are just some of my favorite visual effects compositors and just other film related channels that will really help you improve your game in a lot of ways, so to say. And shameless plug, I do Kaiju related VFX tutorials on my YouTube, Daikaiju Legends, related to all sorts of stuff, so. And yeah, so I think any Q&A that we'll have time for, just one question, 2 questions or so. All right, so we'll do all the questions that we can if anyone wants to ask something, and then otherwise you can catch me outside of the panel. You right there.
Anything with copyright?
Copyright, that is a topic. Man, I've somehow avoided getting a copyright strike, even though I use copyrighted stuff in like every one of my videos. I think it's because I don't monetize my stuff that I don't get taken down. So, but there's always royalty-free stuff in terms of music, because that's what will get you dinged right away is if you use a certain song or something. But I'm always careful with the stuff that I use, and paying attention to copyright. I'm starting to delve a little bit more into risky territory with stuff that we're doing now, but it's more so of a guessing game, so to say. It's unfortunate, but that's just the price you have to pay sometimes, I guess.
What like video editing software is free now, like Adobe After Effects, which is like a subscription?
Stuff that's free, you said? It's tough. Like obviously there's Windows Movie Maker and iMovie that are free, but they're kind of what once you get down to it, because you can't really do any compositing in those. But Get film. Oh, HitFilm. Oh yeah. HitFilm. I forgot about that. Okay, I have not used HitFilm, but yes, I've heard that that's a great low-end tool. I also used Vegas for a while, and that's a $60 flat fee for that program, and that was what I used for a couple years. And it's good for decent compositing if you want to try that. We do one more maybe.
Yes, how exactly do you micromanage the budget for some of these movies, like when it comes to the pay for the actors, the sets, the cinematography, and the suits?
Well, as long as I have money in my bank account. No. A lot of the stuff is just, you need to be good with money, I guess, that's the best advice I can give. Just even writing all that down and having a list and knowing what your safe zone is of like money that you still need to have, because I generally pour most of what I have into new equipment and all that kind of stuff. But having a job helps definitely in trying to pay for stuff. But really, when it comes down to it, because my actors work for free, and I don't have any labor laws coming after me, so we're doing okay. But generally, just be smart and don't waste money all the time, like I sometimes did and still do. But that's what I can say about that, I think. So I think we'll wrap things up there then. Thanks everyone for coming. And, if you have other questions, you can catch me anywhere out in the convention. If I'm walking around, just stop me and ask me something. And we're showing something in Midway at 2 o'clock today, so that'll be fun.
I would like to give a special thank you to Jimmy Moore, GWRzilla, Jeff King, and an extra special thank you to Ultriab for being Patreon supporters during this period. If you want to learn how you too can support this channel and earn some awesome rewards in the process, be sure to visit patreon.com/DaikaijuLegends.